Comedy Tip Tuesday, and we're going to be discussing referrals and recommendations. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Before we get started, please make sure you hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. In case anybody is wondering, Snoopy Bijou's silence has been bought off with Plato treats today. We'll put the link down below in the description. Oh, and also, there's going to be another link down in the description right above the treats, which is going to be my Amazon affiliates link for Butch Bradley's comedy special. Butch Bradley's comedy special just came out on Amazon today. He is legit my favorite comic here in the Las Vegas comedy scene. I love him. I've referenced him before in my comedy lessons, and he's just a good guy and a solid comic, and you guys should check it out. Like I said, there's going to be a link down below for Butch Bradley's special. If you get a chance, check it out. He's a master of crowd work and just a really great comic all the way around. So check that out. And like I said, it's perfect for recommendations and referrals because that is somebody that I would definitely recommend for anything. And I know that a lot of people want to hear about recommendations and referrals. I know a lot of times newer comics are looking for people to refer them and recommend them to different shows, different bookers. I really don't recommend that you ask people just out of nowhere to give you the hookup at certain things. And it can be kind of a touchy thing at times because what you have to remember is that you're asking a comic to put their reputation on the line to recommend you. And some people don't see it as that deep. If you don't see it as that deep, then you probably shouldn't be asking people to recommend you because you're not going to treat it with the respect that it should be treated with. Because recommendations and referrals should be treated like gold. And I don't care what level you're at or what you're doing. If somebody puts their reputation on the line for you or sticks their neck out for you in this business, you should definitely make sure that you treat that with the respect that it deserves. When I was first starting out, this was the best way for me to get booked, especially being gay and people not being used to gay comedians really being that funny or that many gay comedians being around. So I remember when I was starting out in LA, Mike Miratori and Earl Skakel were the two people that would recommend me the most for things. And because I knew how important it was, even when I was first starting out, I always did my best stuff. That's something I would tell you guys. If somebody recommends you for something, don't do any new stuff. It's not an open mic. It's not the time to work on the things that you want to work on. That is the time for you to put your best foot forward and actually let these people see what you can do. Make sure that you make the person, or at least try, because we can all have a bad set on any night. So not too much pressure in that way, but at least try to do your absolute best. If you end up having a bad set, there's a good chance the comic's going to understand that and the booker's going to be like, oh, I can see at least this guy was taking this seriously. Maybe it just turned out to be a bad audience. Maybe it just wasn't your night. Maybe you messed up and didn't start off the right way, which is something I've discussed before. But whatever the deal is, just make sure that you're at least trying to do your best. Like with my recommendations from Mike Miratori and Earl Skakel, I can tell you because I took them so seriously and because I knew what that was worth and I really handled it with the respect that it deserved, I always knocked it out of the park. And then that got me booked for even more stuff. And definitely do not ever lie to a booker or a club owner and say that somebody has recommended you that has not recommended you. And this would seem like common sense, but you'd be surprised how many comics do this. And what you have to remember is that in a lot of cases, when you do that kind of thing, the booker or the club owner is going to go back to the comic that you said that referred you, and they're going to ask them about you. And if that comic says that they did not recommend you, that's going to look terrible. And there's a good chance you're never going to get booked by that booker. So it's just something to keep in mind. It may seem like a good idea at the time, or you may feel like that comic would recommend you. So ask them. If you're close enough with them, you should be able to ask them, and they should give you a yes or no. Like with me, I'm very sparing in who I recommend for things and what I recommend people for. It's not that I don't do it. It's not that I don't like to do it. I have a select group of friends that I know their stand-up, I know their professionalism, and I know they're going to handle things the way that they need to handle them. When you're first starting out, this is one of the most important ways to get booked. And even after you've been working for a while, it's still the best way to really get booked. In my opinion, it really is, because you can send out a link to a bunch of different bookers, and we can talk about that on an episode too. But it just doesn't carry as much weight as a comic that they know and trust recommending you. There are some bookers that will hit me up out of nowhere and they'll just be like, can you recommend some comics? I'm looking to fill some spots. I need reliable guys. I need funny guys. Can you recommend somebody? And then I'll just send several of my favorites and tell them, hit them up, get in contact with them. And then I'll go back to the other comic and I will let them know to get in contact with that booker because that booker's looking for people. Be your most professional as well, because that's another thing that'll reflect on the comedian. And I always remember when people recommend me for stuff that this one isn't mine. And I say that, maybe that sounds a little weird, but to me, this one isn't mine. It's not mine to just behave the way that I want to behave or get annoyed with things that, are otherwise trivial. I really do treat that with respect because I'm trying to make the person that recommended me look the best that they can look as well. I recently had this happen to me and I referenced it on a Instagram post. I showed and I don't bring this up to be catty. I really bring this up to make the point because I'm not mad at the other comedian. Sometimes people think I'm mad at them when I'm not mad at them. I'm just disappointed in the behavior. And what happened was, I was hanging out at Butch Bradley's show. He's got a residency here at the Strat in the LA Comedy Club. And I had stopped in just to say hi. And there was another comedian that was in the green room that I hadn't seen for a while. And I don't know really well, but he is professional and he works with some of my friends. He headlines his own stuff. And he had told me that he had just moved to Las Vegas. And he told me that he didn't care about getting paid and he didn't care about the venue. He just wanted to be able to work on his stuff. So he asked me if I had anything that I could possibly hook him up with. So I immediately went to work the next day. I got in contact with 2 different people that I know book shows that pay so that at least he would get something for it because he does deserve some kind of compensation. And so I got in contact with these 2 people. And the first one gave me a date for like a week and a half later. And the other one gave me a date for him for maybe a month later. And what happened was the first one, he wasn't necessarily happy with it because he didn't think the audience was paying enough attention. And for me, I was like, I do that show regularly. Technically, I did that night because for free. I did my set for free because they were hooking my friend up. And so I worked for free that night just to get him a spot. So I know that audience wasn't terrible, but they're a bar. So it wasn't the most attentive audience, but I have a way of just punching them in the face and getting them to do what I want. So I had a great set with them. His set seemed all right. I didn't listen to all of it. I didn't sit for all of it. I don't owe you that. But I did hang out and it went all right. But he wasn't the most happy with it. So when it came to the second one, he had started to get on my nerves a little bit because he was asking me if it was a bar where they pay attention or if it was one where they just happen to have comedy. And my thing with that is I'm not here to hold your hand. I made the recommendation. I got you booked. I'm not your agent, but I full on got you booked for both of these gigs. And you're asking me what it's like. How about you just go there, see what it's like, do what you do, and if you don't like it, then don't ever get booked there again. It's on you at that point. I just took your exact instructions when you said you didn't care where it was or if it was paid. So I got you paid, and it's up to you. You know, these gigs don't pay the most, but they pay something. So anyway, we cut to the night of the show, and the booker calls me and says that the comedian that I recommended isn't there. So I text message the comedian. He doesn't answer. So then I call the comedian. He doesn't answer. And then the next day he hits me up and tells me that he fell asleep at 8 p.m. so he didn't end up going and he's sorry. And I just told him in so many words not to pretend to be an actual comic around me again, because I thought that you were actually going to do what you were supposed to do, and I don't mind that I chose those words or that phrasing, because to me, real comics don't do that. You're supposed to be there, you be a professional, you actually make it there. You don't fall asleep for any of your other gigs, right? It's not like your regular thing that you just fall asleep and don't do gigs. I'm not going to keep track of you. I'm not going to remind you that you have a gig that night. I didn't even remember that he had a gig that night. Just when I got the phone call, then I was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, and I don't know. Luckily, the other comic that I had also recommended for that night was able to fill the headliner time. But it just made me look bad. And I don't really worry so much about it in that way. Like some of you might be thinking, well, this doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Again, if that's the way you feel, then don't ask anybody for recommendations, because you're not going to treat it with the respect that it needs to be treated with. Because what this comic didn't understand is it's not as simple as you just not showing up to this gig. That is a gig that when other friends come through town or other friends move to town, I can recommend people for, and because my people that I recommend do well, then they're likely to take my recommendations in the future. So that comic saw it as just him missing the show that night, and I see it as kind of a blemish on my recommendations. While some people might not see that as that big of a deal, it really is a bigger deal than you probably realize. So that's what I would say as far as recommendations and referrals go. Not sure if I missed anything. If I did, please let me know. Maybe you have something you want me to talk about or address on a future Comedy Tip Tuesday. If you have any questions, like I always say, no question is stupid. I don't mind answering anything that I can possibly answer. Please just leave your comment down below, and I promise on a future episode I will definitely get to it. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.